Hi there, I'm Ken, the founder of MinnoTank. What is MinnoTank? MinnoTank is a platform to connect early-stage tech startups and investors through an online pitch. Want to pitch your early-stage tech startup to hundreds of investors absolutely free? Interested in investing in early-stage tech startups yourself? Head over to MinnoTank.com to join our email list to learn how. All right, everybody, enjoy the pitch. Hey guys, this is Ken with MinnoTank, and I have Raj with Raj Nation Innovation. We are going to start today with part 2 of Build Your RockStar Personal Brand, and Raj is going to lead us through that. So this is a continuation of last week's episode. So Raj, RockStar Personal Brand Part 2.
Thank you, Ken. And when you say RockStar Personal Brand, I know what you mean is, if you smell what the Rock is cooking.
Thank you for the eyebrow. That was good.
And of course, for part 2, I didn't mention it last week, but I am wearing a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson t-shirt.
I didn't even know he had t-shirts. Okay.
Yeah. Well, this is from back in the 90s, back in the WWF. So let's talk part 2 here, continuing on with how to be like The Rock, leveraging your personal brand to be more memorable with your stakeholders and how they're going to help you as a founder and as a startup at the end of the day. So last week, the 3 points we talked about were how to pitch yourself, creating content to get the word out, and cleaning up your LinkedIn profile. This week, I want to just kind of dig into, get deeper into some of those points and actually use The Rock as an example. So the first thing I want to talk about today is the idea that your past matters. Don't gloss over it. What I mean here is we tend to think that only what we've done that's directly relevant to the company that we're building should be expressed. But that makes you really robotic. It makes you really inhuman at the end of the day. And you want to be more human, right? As we've said a bunch of times, tap into their hearts, you can tap into their minds. Create some emotion around it. So understand that everything you have done has relevance. And there may have been a random job you did, but does that show a tendency towards being entrepreneurial, right? Even like your lemonade stand, how can you incorporate that into your story? What I really like is Scott DeGrossier, the founder of Wicked Reports, a company that I'm working with. When we were working on it, so you get to that point in your pitch deck where you talk about the team and the founder. And most people will just write like 15 plus years at Deloitte Consulting, whatever it might be, the professional quality, the resume basically. But you want to be able to speak beyond the resume. And this is where we dug into like, what does he really care about as a human being? Now, for a high level, Wicked Reports is advanced reporting for your online marketing. It can track the ROI of every single ad you've ever run. Very sophisticated. Why is he building that? Well, that's what we dug into within that slide in the deck. And the idea is that, when we started talking, he told me when he was in 8th grade, he spent his summer vacation reading The Handicapper's Guide to Horse Racing. And his grandfather would sneak him into the track to bet on the horses. And he was like, it had nothing to do with gambling. He's like, I don't really care about gambling. But I got obsessed with creating these like data systems and then having theories and testing the theories out. So, it'd be, maybe I'd bet like $10, but I'd spread it out across all these different horses and figure out how can I like essentially create a system here that works in my advantage, which then led into building databases at Motorola professionally, which then led into Wicked Reports, which is essentially the creation of the company was essentially a thesis statement that he had. He was like, can I track the ROI of every single ad? And then he built out a system to prove it, and that's what his company is doing. What you're doing there is saying that your company is essentially just an extension of how your brain works. And that's what you want to convey. This isn't just some like neat thing you're doing. You're not doing it because it's money. You're doing it because this like your brain knows no other way of how to operate, and this is a manifestation of that. And what's cool is like on the slide, we have on there, like we have his qualifications professionally, but above all that, it says, I speak 2 languages, English and data.
Yep.
And that gets the point across really well for him. The other thing I see too, when you only talk about the job is it doesn't allow someone to find what they can connect with. And to use like The Rock as a very specific example, I always, I do this personal branding presentation called RockStar Personal Branding. And I always like to do this comparison of The Rock versus Hulk Hogan, right?
Okay.
So, like, just Hulk Hogan. When I say that, what do you think of?
Well, I lived in Tampa Bay, Florida, and he owns a restaurant, so I think of that. And we should clarify, these are both wrestlers, right? So if you guys, like me, are not wrestler fans, but I do come from white trash Florida, so I do know what this is. That's where I come from. That's my personal background. I'm Orlando, Florida. Like, we had alligators in our front yard. Sure. Totally white trash, and like trailer parks just next door. So, but yeah, two different wrestlers. So The Rock and Hulk Hogan, but I don't think of anything specific with Hulk Hogan. No.
Right, but you know, if you think wrestler at the end of the day, right?
Yes, I do.
And when you picture what he looks like what is he wearing, and what is his like facial appearance?
Blonde, painfully tanned, and like always no shirt on. Is that who he is?
Yeah,
I'm not even sure.
Right?
I'm not sure. I'm thinking of the right guy. Like, I don't actually know.
You're right. That's Hulk Hogan. That's that image he created, right? Where it's blonde mustache, skin of a hot dog. He has the bandana. He's wearing like a red cutoff tee usually, right? Something like, or a yellow cutoff, something like that. And he got trapped in the job. No one ever got to know who he was as a person, to the point where, and you may only know this because you grew up in Tampa, but do you know Hulk Hogan's real name?
No idea. How would I?
Okay. Let's talk about The Rock now. When you think of The Rock, what comes to mind?
Well, I know I've seen him in a lot of movies, right? So I know like he's a really well-known person. But I don't know. What do I think of? That's a good question. What should I be thinking of?
I mean, movies is great, right? Like when you think about what he's been in, like what movies have you seen him in?
Well, I know he's coming up soon, right? Isn't he coming up in Pacific Rim? This is kind of dating this video, but he's been in some really big, serious movies, as well as like in something else, in some gorilla movie. But he's been in a lot. He's been in, right. A number, but it's not just, it's something else other than Jumanji too. There's a lot. He's been in a lot of like different movies.
Yeah, he's done that. He's also a wrestler.
True.
I think you've probably seen him on like Conan O'Brien or any of those like late night shows before, right? He was the voice of one of the characters of Maui in Moana.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
Sang a song in that. So very versatile human being that pretty much everyone likes and wants to be like. I include me in that category too. Now, what I mean, why I use this example is because Hulk Hogan got trapped in his job. No one ever got to know who he was at the end of the day, and we all know him for being the wrestler, and that's it. I mean, you happen to know he has a restaurant because of geography, but that's about it. Do you know The Rock's real name?
Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah. It took less than half a second for you to tell me that, and you still don't know Hulk Hogan's name, and Hulk Hogan has been around for longer than The Rock. No
idea, but I also have no interaction with, like, I've seen what I always talk about when I talk about humans as adding a third dimension. I think people are super good at being two-dimensional. I work at Deloitte, and I'm this age and this gender, and like I'm a blank, blank, blank.
Yeah.
But I very rarely have like a third dimension, which is the emotional side of you, or who you are behind just your job. I think it's paramount to personal branding is understanding how you can be a three-dimensional human being. But I see a lot of different variations of The Rock or Dwayne, and you know, you see articles about him, you see him writing. So yeah, I get a lot of three-dimensional aspects of him as a person. So yeah, I do know who he is.
Yeah, and for just to so you're aware, Hulk Hogan's real name is Terry Bollea. He was not born Hulk, and Hogan.
It just sounds silly when Terry Bollea,
right? But everyone knows like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and he was able to take wrestling and actually use it to launch him into every other pursuit that he wanted to get into. To the point where now he can kind of just do whatever he feels like, right? He didn't get trapped in that like that caricature of being just a wrestler. And Hogan is actually, he was in movies in the 90s, but he basically was in movies playing Hulk Hogan in the movies. Whereas The Rock, three dimensions, right? He plays the Tooth Fairy on rollers on a hockey rink, right? He plays all these different characters. And the fact is, a lot of his movies aren't actually that good, but he's always entertaining in them.
Sure.
And people will go see a movie because it's The Rock, because it's Dwayne Johnson at the end of the day. So I use this example to say personality over just, you know, what's the costume you're wearing. How can you bring to the table to investors, to stakeholders in general? How can you show them who you are, not just what you do? And I always imagine, last week when we did part one of this, we talked about the how to pitch yourself, the I believe, I do this by, I do, I am. I always imagine if Hulk Hogan were to walk into a room and have to introduce himself like at a party, he'd do something like, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Well, let me tell you something, brother. I've been body slamming giants for over 30 years, brother. Andre the Giant 30 years ago. And now I'm still body slamming people left and right, whether it's in the wrestling ring or whether it's in the courtroom, brother. And my name is Hulk Hogan, brother. And do you want to talk about wrestling, brother? No. Restaurant I have? Yeah. You know, at one point he opened up a restaurant called Pasta Mania, and that didn't go so well.
It's not a brand? What? Are you kidding me?
So that's how I picture Hulk Hogan. Very one-dimensional in terms of not knowing who he is as a person. When The Rock walks into a room, I imagine if they're like, hey, what's up, Rock? Do we call you Rock or do we call you Dwayne? And he'll be like, you know what, guys? Call me Rock, Dwayne. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you call me. What matters is that if I'm here, it's because I'm out here to shatter expectations every way I can. And the way I know I can do that best is by electrifying audiences. I'm a wrestler. I'm an actor. I'm a voice artist. I got the coolest Instagram account in the world. You smell what I'm cooking? That's how I think like The Rock carries himself, right? He's not trapped in one job. His why is shattering expectations. His how, the way he does that, is through electrifying audiences. Everything that he does, he doesn't just do it. He does it to like the 180th like percentile of it, right? Right? It's not enough for him to be in it. He has to like, and if he's in something, you know, you're like, I gotta see what he's doing in this.
Sure.
Right? He doesn't just do it and he's like, okay, I did it and that's it. He is putting his all into it. He's putting something extra into it. And what's really like, I think a great like example of this, you know, he's actually been on talk shows before where they said, we call you Rock or Dwayne, and he actually says it doesn't matter. I think what's really funny is as a wrestler, one of his catchphrases was if someone would interrupt him, he'd say, and who are you? And they'd say their name. He'd say, it doesn't matter what your name is. And now like in his own life, he's applying, like, it doesn't matter if you call me Rock or Dwayne. And in fact, like one of his like wrestling promos is rants that he'll do on the microphone, which I believe is just, it's a great microcosm of who he is as a person.
Okay.
He'll say, he said, you're going to get beat by the jabroni beating, pie eating, trailblazing, eyebrow raising, kicking doors down, ain't going to stop getting your behind whooped by the people's champ, The Rock. Right? Like in that, he says kicking doors down, AKA shattering expectations. People's champ, I electrify people, right? That's who The Rock is at the end of the day. And that's how, like, you know, when you're with your investors, be more like The Rock. Ask yourself, WWDD, what would Dwayne do? Right? How can you infuse who you are into this? Not just, hey, I worked this job that also is in technology, therefore I'm building a technology startup.
So I want to pinpoint this and help bring it back. So bring us away from Rock, Dwayne Johnson fanboying and focus a little more towards startups. So what you just said, which I think is really valuable is, and I'm going to use my phrase as three-dimensional, right? So whenever they walk into a room, what do you think about with that person? I think it's so important with a startup founder that they themselves have a personal brand, because in all honesty, when an investor decides to make an early stage investment in you, they're investing in you and your co-founders. And more importantly, what they want is they want to see some young 20, 30 something, if that's what you are, or someone with a lot of experience. But let's focus on the younger side right now. They want to see that young 20, 30 something who's going to build 5 more companies in their life. And they want to form that relationship with you. And they want to form a profitable relationship right now, but more profitable in the future. Mm-hmm. So they're investing in you and saying, you are a great idea for my money. You're a great way for me to allocate resources to, and I like who you are. And I think whether it's going to be this startup or the next one or the third one, I know you're going to be a positive impact on these companies. Therefore, I'm going to invest into you. And most likely, after you exit this opportunity, I'm going to pull you into my other company to solve their problems. So that's really what we have to think of when we think of investors. So your personal brand, whether you're the CTO in this small tech startup or you're the chief of sales at another startup, you've got to remember your personal brand is paramount to you continuing getting work and finding ways to be utilized again and getting more investors next time.
Absolutely. One last thing I want to touch on here that can really help in shaping your story is the idea that, you know, we've talked in previous episodes. We did one episode on the superhero strategy where we mentioned like, what's your company's kryptonite? But also know, like, you as an individual, you have something, you know, you may think like, oh, I can't share that. But like, is there a way that you have something in your past that shows how you've overcome something? And that's very like job interviewee, but there's a reason why they ask that, right? And The Rock has what he calls his $7 moment. And that is, he says, he's like, like I was in my it was like somewhere in like the mid 90s. I was sitting in my pickup truck. I had $7 in my pocket. And I said to myself, I'm either going to make something of myself or I'm going to die in this truck alone. And that's when it all changed for him, right? And now he uses that as part of his story. He has his production company is called $7 Production. So understand that if you have some example that you have overcome something in your life, that goes a long way. And it doesn't have to be as serious as I only had $7 in my pocket. Another thing I really like too is I've worked with a handful of immigrant founders. And do you realize how hard that experience is to go to a country you don't know about or you've never lived in before and figure out how to make it work in that country? That is an entrepreneurial journey all on its own. So if you can explain that, or Ken, in your case, like you represent the LGBTQ community, right? Like being able to talk about like how that has shaped you and what you've had to overcome to be able to confidently put yourself out there, right? Like these are the things that people say, yes, like they don't back down. They get up and they keep pushing. They find a way. You want to find founders as an investor who find a way.
Sure. And instead of just saying like, hey, I built this awesome company, here's what we have now, look at some of the previous hurdles that I've surpassed. And this hurdle that I'm looking at right now is much smaller. I can definitely do this one. My past ones were so much bigger. So Raj, because we're limited on time, I want to ask you this question because I know you've got one.
Yeah.
Can we hear your $7 moment? Because I've got a great one too, and I'd love to share it. Can I get yours?
I mean, I think I've got a couple.
I want one. I want the best one. What is your most dire circumstance for your $7 moment?
I think, and this gets pretty personal, but it took me 12 years to realize it, but it was a huge shaping point in my own life where I look back and I was like, I am what I am today because I was like held down for a certain point. The scariest day of my entire life was September 12th, 2001, because I had to go to school that day, and there were people who were like ruthless, and they said, "Oh, you have this skin color. Your people did this to my people." Which it wasn't even my people.
Sure,
that's besides the point, right? And I was stripped of my own identity that day. And I mentioned on the previous episode we did of this show how you have to like know what your why is, right? And I mentioned my why is this belief of expression. On that day, I was stripped of all ability to express myself. And I had to go into a public setting and be scared of who I was. Be scared for the fact that I was who I was. So that for me, while in the moment I didn't like say like, okay, now I'm going to change things. That for me, I always look back to that to be like, I know I never want to feel like that again.
Sure. All right, I'll share mine. It's a little more lighthearted and kind of funny, yeah? And it'll be
please.
The episode. So
I'm happy to talk about that stuff, right? Because it makes me who I am.
No, and I think it's good for a three-dimensional aspect, right? Like I think you're definitely a unique guy, and that's cool. It's good to learn those things because I think, especially as you might see in the investor community, you have a 94% chance is a straight white man. They're not necessarily going to understand the situation and circumstance that you went through. So I think that's valuable. So I have a funny, like, flip it on its head for Ken, where you're a foreigner going into a foreign country. Well, as you may or may not know, I did that. I went to China. And me being, the not necessarily a genius from Florida, I said, I can learn Chinese. Come on, that's easy, right? Like, just scribble on a paper up, Chinese done. So I jumped off into the deep end, and I went on a summer program, but I decided I was just going to stay, and that's what I was going to do, like finish up my bachelor's degree in China. Summer program, you have no idea. You're with the college, you go out, you take 6 to 8 weeks, you guys travel all around, all your logistics are taken for, your meals are paid for. It's so easy. You have a translator all the time. You say, ni hao, everyone's so impressed. You said hello. Oh my God. Yeah, so then you get there on your own, and you have to figure out how to go get a cell phone in a foreign country in which you're not even sure exactly how to count to 10. But the most serious thing is that in a place like China, now the circumstance is hard to find if you're an English native speaker. So when you speak English natively, going to any country, most likely there's someone who's going to speak your language. Very few countries are there that does not have that. China's one of them. China's not a place where people speak English on a regular basis. There's billions of them, and there's millions of you, and they think Mandarin is more important. So what happened to me, Raj, was it was 8 weeks with my summer program, and then I left. 6 weeks after, I had lost 24 pounds, which was like 18% of my weight at the time. That was a lot of weight. You want to know why I lost that? Can you guess why, Raj? Can I kick it? Yes, you can.
You couldn't order food?
Couldn't order food. Would walk into a restaurant, I saw a wall of characters, and I was honestly shaking with nervousness. Huh. And every time I walked into the same restaurant, at least I was smart enough to do this, and the woman would look at me and say, 你要吃什么? Like, what do you want to eat? And each time I would say, row. And it would be meat. I would finally learn the word for meat. I'm craving to eat. And she would say, 帅哥,你要吃什么样的肉啊? Which is a really long way to say, what kind of meat?
What kind, yeah.
Right? And I could not understand. And I was just like, oh. And so what I would do is I'd go to 7-Eleven and I get some awful like prepackaged trash because that's all I could figure out how to order. And so I guess that's my $7 moment, in that I had lost so much weight that I went in one day to one of these restaurants with my translator book, and I stared at that wall and I took a picture of it, and then I started writing out all the translations for myself, and then I eventually learned it. Nice. It's not $7, it's like 19 pounds. It was really bad for your body. But what I'm saying is, whenever, and what's kind of funny is for my own personal RockStar brand, and like that's a good story when you're talking about like a hurdle you've overcome. And it's actually one of the ways I got to where I am today, based around Merrill Lynch. They would have never hired me. I'm some boy from Florida with some tier 4 degree in Chinese. What? Like, why are you bothering us at this financial firm? Oh, you learned Mandarin in 1 year. Mm-hmm. Oh, you were able to overcome something that large, right? Or you're like Raj. You were able to not only sustain, but thrive in a world that the entire world directed every weapon they had at you because you were a person of color that day. Exactly. Yeah. And if you can sustain past that, and you can keep going, and more importantly, you have to share it. If you don't share it, I don't know. We're living in 2018, or we're living in 2020. There's people who right now are alive that didn't experience 2001. Right. They didn't experience 9/11. So they're not going to know what that experience is like. Mm-hmm. So now I'm like really getting excited again.
Yeah.
I think it's an important part of your personal brand, and I think it's really nice to learn things like that and get more personal, because I see it over and over again. I get much more connected to someone. And especially with investors, if they're bought into you and your mission and your idea, the business will come. Right. Good idea, it's scalable, great, let's figure it out. I want to partner with you. So I couldn't agree more. Building a RockStar personal brand and being confident enough to share it, Raj. Like, you just shared a very personal experience. Mine's more funny because I lost a bunch of weight and I was dumb. But being able to break down those own walls for yourself, and I guess it does start with yourself, right? How do you break down those walls? How do you come to the table and share that and let someone in and connect with you?
I think we can do a whole nother 5 episodes on RockStar personal branding.
We'll see if we do that. Here's what we will do. Guys, we're going to link everything in the comments below of all the different subjects we talked about. And if there's any kind of links to other articles, we'll link it there. If you want to have us have a conversation about your personal brand, maybe we'll possibly look over someone's brand and we'll bring up a couple different profiles. I like that idea too. Kind of limitless what we can do here. But leave some comments at the bottom. If you have any comments for Raj with Raj Nation Innovation or Ken with MinnoTank, please do leave it there and we'll answer them in a future episode. Raj, thank you very much. That was an awesome episode.
Thank you for smelling what I'm cooking.
I always do. All right, thanks. Bye.